I'm Mark Dawson from the Self-Publishing Show, and this is Self-Publishing Spotlight, where we shine a light on the indie authors who are changing the world of publishing, one book at a time.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Spotlight. We meet indie authors at all stages of their careers and ask them a series of 5 questions. 5 questions about their process, their mistakes and their successes. 5 answers that will help you level up your own author career. My name's Tom Ashford and I'm part of the Self-Publishing Formula. Don't forget that you can get your self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. This week's guest is Daniel Willcocks. He's written 19 books in the horror genre and he lives in the UK. Welcome, Daniel.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you on. Do you want to start by going through the books that you've written?
Yeah, so I tend to write everything what I label as dark fiction. So that's a mixture of horror, can leak a little bit into sci-fi, a little bit into post-apocalyptic fiction as well. I tend to like exploring the darker side of things. So a lot of my books can be quite dark and grimy, but I always have that sort of uplifting humanity, hope side of it. Been writing since 2015, and I was one of those people who I was quite fortunate that my first novella that I released ended up making it to number 1 in the horror charts around Halloween of 2015.
Wow.
Which kind of just sparked this crazy journey we call independent publishing, and been a lot of bits and pieces along the way. I've got a podcast called the Other Stories podcast, which releases 20-minute horror fiction every Monday. And around Christmas last year, we hit 5 million downloads with that, me and my writers that I write with under our story studio, Hawk and Cleaver. And I also have a podcast where I interview other writers as well and give them a chance to promote themselves similarly to this. And then we look into sort of like the mindset of how you become a writer, the obstacles that you face and everything else. But I primarily focus on the fiction side of things and getting the words on the page, just because I like to hold a book in my hand with my own name on it, because I'm a narcissist.
Yeah, I think we all are at some level.
Yes. There's nothing better than that feeling of literally just holding a paperback of your own book and going, it's I don't know whether it's it's finished side of it or whether it's this is something I'm proud of. It can be a mixture of both sometimes.
Yeah, it's actually real.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, well, if we go into the questions, the first one is, why do you write?
It's a big question. It's something that I think my answers have changed over the years that I've been writing. But I think the main reason that I write is the catharsis of it, particularly when you get into a book that deals with certain subject matter that potentially isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse of understanding or experience. Obviously, I write a lot of sort of horror and dark fiction, so I tend to play with the things that are a bit more taboo, things that are a bit less spoken about in society. And for me, it's just a way of, I guess, dabbling in the other side and processing how people might think, react, and deal with particular situations. Not slightly for the off chance that I'm not a post-apocalyptic sort of nuthead that's going to plan into the future as to what might happen in an apocalypse, but it's definitely nice to almost prepare yourself a little bit for certain situations.
Yeah.
And I think one of the main bonuses that obviously comes off of writing things that are quite honest and true to yourself is the people who read your stuff and then reach back out to you, and particularly those who are in sort of disadvantaged situations. Or I get a lot of people who are either come out of surgery recently or are dealing with some horrible stuff, and they say that reading my books is, it takes them away from that, which I don't understand because I write horror. But actually having that feedback and having people reach out and saying this is having some kind of impact on my life is a huge push to keep writing.
Yeah. Was there a particular story that you wanted to tell when you first decided to write?
There was a mixture of certain stories, and the novella that I ended up writing, Sins of Smoke, came just completely out of left field. So it wasn't one that I was particularly planning on writing, but it was one that just kind of came to me. And I guess that a lot of my work tends to deal a little bit with relationships, and particularly how people are behind closed doors, and the situations, the things that you can't really put a name on that are real. I really like getting into the nitty-gritty of psychological horror and finding the things that happen in everyday life that you can really sort of put a spin on and try and understand what it is. But yeah, when I was first writing, it was just a compulsion. It was just I had a bit of spare time. My son had just been born, and it was one of those things of, I want to start writing. I want to prove to him that if there's a passion that you have, you can find time to fit that in and make something work from it.
Nice. And you mentioned being indie published. Have you ever got a traditional contract or pursued a traditional contract?
I haven't. It's something that is teetering on the back of my mind. I've had a couple of what I call indie publishing contracts, so working alongside publishing houses or indie sort of built, but no, nothing down the traditional route.
Yeah, fair. Okay, well, question number 2 is, how do you write? So do you tend to plot your stories out or just pants them, as the term is?
It's a mixture. So when I'm writing short stories, I'll pants it, because for me, a short story is that just catharsis, that letting out onto the page and just seeing what happens. And 9 times out of 10, that comes out well. Sometimes it comes out as a scrambled mess, but it's the rest of the times that you kind of cling on to. When it comes to writing longer words, it's definitely a case of needing some kind of plan. I'm not somebody that will spend weeks researching and planning, and it's probably partly the reason why I deal with post-apocalypse or stuff that is more difficult to explain, more like the supernatural, because you can ground. There's less need to ground that in reality, so you can play with it a bit more. But I'll definitely know what I'm heading towards. I'll know what the premise is. I'll have an idea about what characters are involved, and then I'll kind of let the situation unfold. So I'm a bit of a mix of both when it comes to the longer form work.
Okay. And in terms of the writing software that you use, do you use Scrivener, Vellum, Word?
Again, a mixture of all. So I'll write originally in Scrivener, and then I'll transfer that in Word to proof from my end. And then, I use Vellum to format. And there are a few other sort of software components that I use along the way. So I tend to do writing sprints. And for that, I'll use an app like Forest, in which you just block off everything on your phone for however long you want to set it, and just dive into the words for as long as I can. I sometimes use Pinterest to generate ideas and just create a bit of a mood board for the story I'm trying to create. And one thing that I have found incredibly effective for myself is that I've created my own Spotify playlist for writing. So it's filled with sort of a lot of soundtracks from horror films, from horror games, just anything that might be quite dark and mood setting. Whenever I write, that's a playlist I listen to the point that I've ruined my Spotify end of year analysis. They do like the end of year. Here's what you listen to most. It's just a load of random score and soundtrack crap that I've been listening to when I write, but it is what it is.
I've done the exact same thing with sci-fi. It's a 24-hour playlist that I just put on the shuffle. And, now there's no actual bands.
No, which is a bit sad, but at the same time, it's a good way to actually get the words down, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, well, question number 3 is, are you a full-time author? If you are, how did you get there? And if you aren't, what steps are you taking to make it happen?
So I am a full-time writer. I went full-time April last year, so I'm approaching my year anniversary of that.
Nice.
And I took a mixture of steps, really. I made sure I was getting the writing down every day. I was working on projects that I love. I was saving up in my old job to get to a point where I had, I wouldn't say it was enough money to comfortably have jumped off. And I think actually in the end, the situation at my old job was a case of I was almost pushed out. Well, situations occurred and I just went, you know what, I'm not working here anymore. I'm going to try and make this happen. And it also worked because one of my things that I'm sort of known for is collaborations. So I've collaborated with a lot of different people. And because of that, I've gotten to a point where the royalties were reaching a level where I could jump out and sort of make a go of it full time. And I think one of the big things from that is because I know there might be people listening who are on that edge and aren't sure whether or not to make a go of it. I think the important thing to remember then is just remember that the minute you do jump off that ledge, you've got an additional 40, 60, 80 hours, however long you want to put into it a week, in which you can then dedicate that to your writing and actually put in the steps to build that. I got from where I began to where I was before I took the leap, writing, I think, is a minimum of around 1,000 words a day average. And obviously if you're full-time, that's now up to sort of 5, 6, 7,000 words a day. And with that, you can really produce more, get that ball rolling, and just keep on going until you've made a go of it.
Yeah. Okay, well, question number 4 is, what mistakes do you think you've made and what have you got right?
So the thing I think I've got right is that I've surrounded myself with people who are similarly minded, people that are going for the same kind of thing, and people that inspire me. I built quite a few sort of communities and networks in which there's a lot of people that I can rely on, really friendly people. I mean, I'm sure people have said this before, but the indie writing community is just the friendliest community there is, and everyone's willing to help each other. I think not being afraid to reach out and just either ask for help or ask to get involved in projects has been one of my biggest strengths in terms of sort of getting to where I am today. And in terms of things that I've not quite done right, or what, probably not failures as much, but one thing that I'm still working on, there's still a challenge every day, is just trying to find the right routine to avoid burnout. Because as an indie, you can really get bogged down into feeling like you have to constantly produce. and forgetting to give yourself a rest sometimes, because the money isn't always reliable, but as long as you keep working, it's there. But sometimes you can almost zone in on work and forget the other side of things as well. So that's kind of been my biggest challenge since going full time.
Yeah. Okay, question number 5 is, what's your final piece of advice for authors starting out in indie publishing?
It doesn't matter what you have to say. If you want to say it, just get it down on paper. As soon as you get the words down on the page, something magic happens, and the rest of the words just begin to flow. And I think the biggest nugget of advice I can give from that is, when I originally first started writing, I remember that I'd write 200 words a day, and that would feel like the greatest achievement in the world. And I'd chip away. If you can find your minimum and then just every day improve it by 10, 20, 30 words to a point that you're happy and you're producing the things that you want to, then it's possible to write that book that you've been wanting to write for ages, write that novella, write that journal column, whatever it is you want to do. Just get the words on the page, get your ass in the chair and get it done.
Yeah, it's good advice. Cool. Well, those are your 5 questions. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
That's it for this week's Self-Publishing Spotlight. Don't forget that you can get your free self-publishing resource kit at selfpublishingformula.com/starter kit. And if you want to appear as a guest on this show, send us brief details about yourself and your writing at selfpublishingformula.com/spotlight-guest. I'm Tom Ashford, and I'll see you again next week.